fucking awesome. Come on, it's gonna be fucking awesome. You know the words. It's gonna be fucking awesome. That's it, say. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Yeah!
Check. Hello. It's the Coolest Geek Alive. How you doing? It's Saturday morning, and I've got another awesome episode of the show for you, specifically in the series of getting you into comic book reading. I'm sure I'll break this up with some other things soon enough, but I thought I did Batman. I did 2 parts of Batman. I figured let's do an episode on Superman. I was talking about how great Superman is. I haven't read everything myself that there is to read. Hold on, I gotta let my cat out. But I have read quite a bit. And I do have a lot of friends who have read quite a bit. So I reached out to a buddy of mine, Joe Corallo, and I had him help me out a little bit with my list of I haven't came up with a good title yet. So whatever I'm about to say is going to be just some stupid thing or whatever. But this is Superman 101. I mean, this is better than that. This kind of will give you, for the most part, the best of Superman throughout the years, minus a focus on maybe a few eras that I'm missing of greatness. But there's a lot of coverage here. So check this out. This is where I think you should start if you want to get into Superman. The first story, and the whole first group here of maybe 4, I will call the entry level Superman. That is really great kick off a love of Superman kind of stories. And one of them is called Superman for the Man Who Has Everything. It is in the collection Across the Universe, the DC Universe stories of Alan Moore. There are some really great stories in this collection that I like as well beyond this story in particular. There is also a important Superman story that I will mention later on at the end of this thing that is also collected here. So it's appropriate that this be the first, and that'll be the last one that we talk about. But for the Man Who Has Everything, it is just an incredible story about Superman on his birthday, and Mongol shows up, and he gets this flower attached to this alien flower attached to his chest that puts you into an altered reality where you get everything you want. So you start to believe in this false place where you have everything that you'd ever want. And everybody, all the superheroes have very unique and interesting whatever they would want. And to have to, reject a world that's whatever you want to go back to this one, that's some torture, man. And I like my superheroes tortured. So anyway, there's some, it's just so wonderful, beautifully drawn. I'm not positive that it's Brian Bolland. I think it might be Brian Bolland who drew that one. He's one of my favorite comic book artists. If it's not, it's somebody else wonderful. And maybe Bolland just did the covers. I'm not remembering. But a lot of these things, it's been a while since I've read them, but a lot of what I'm going to recommend today I have read. Also in this first opening group, we've got Superman Birthright by Mark Waid and Leinil Francis Yu. I don't remember the details of it, but I remember really loving it. Mark Waid is a huge Superman fan. He's always wanted to write Superman. He's finally getting the opportunity to write some now. I probably would recommend those things that he's doing. I'm sure it's probably good. But the Superman Birthright was really great, and Leinil Francis Yu has a really awesome art style, and I recommend that one. It's a good entry-level Superman thing that kind of gives you a baseline for who he is and some of the interesting things about him and his life. Also, and I love to recommend Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. They did a wonderful Superman story called Superman for All Seasons. It was originally, I think, 4 prestige format, which are these larger hardcover magazine issues of the book with a spine. It's awesome. It's beautiful. It's really subtle light. It's got a great something for everybody kind of thing. You could get away with reading it to your children. It's really awesome. I recommend Superman for All Seasons to anybody. And then also Superman Peace on Earth by Alex Ross and Paul Dini. Paul Dini's the writer. He's known for a lot of things in animation, including starting out, I think, in Masters of the Universe episodes, and he's known more for Batman the Animated Series. He's done some great work in comics, and him and Alex Ross did two, or actually more than that, but they did some giant magazine sized books where Alex Ross's paintings are just blown up to poster size, and they're gorgeous. They're very simple, but again, great entry level Superman to get you into the the hobby of reading. Sorry, I didn't mute my computer. To get you into Superman, like all of these just will make you feel good, will make you happy, and look beautiful. So that's it. That's my little crop for the opening of, like, any of these places are a good place to start and dip your foot in, and there's some beautiful stuff. But starting to get into like some continuity, or giving you a premise to follow, regarding the television seasons of Superman, we're going to start with some that I haven't read myself. I've been meaning to read for a very long time, but they're as classic as you get. It's the John Byrne Man of Steel Superman. I'm told they still hold up rather well, and at the very least, the John Byrne Man of Steel, the initial bit, I believe there's many more issues collected after that. If you like that. I haven't read it, so I just say it's been recommended to me a million times. I've meant to read it. It's on my list. I'll probably read it soon. But if you like that initial run, which I think is like a 6-issue miniseries, then Byrne continues on Superman for a while, and there's a whole bunch of issues that are collected, I believe. I didn't actually write that one down. I kind of skipped ahead of that. I meant to go back, but I'm pretty positive. Death of Superman is the next thing that I would recommend. Death of Superman is really where I personally, as a reader, went. Like, I didn't go any further back than that, but Death of Superman kicked me off, and Death of Superman's awesome. It just really puts Superman into the context of the DC universe in a powerful way. The story is simple, in some ways stupid, but ultimately it evokes a lot of emotion out of all the characters, and and the character work is all very good. And there's lots of different characters who guest star in this book, because it's like a entirety of not the Justice League, but the entirety of the DC universe sort of event, him dying. Granted, not everybody shows up, but there's just a lot of appearances by various friends on the Justice League and whatnot throughout this series, and it definitely puts Superman into some perspective. Reading this, when you do, you'll kind of go, oh wow, they weren't exactly setting Superman up for this story in the films. And that's a problem, because what is on display here with Superman and what he means to the DC universe and his sort of purity that he represents, it really means something. It's worth something, and to make him more modern and make him rough around the edges and learning the hard way and killing Zod, and I think long term it's a real mistake once you start to read some of these stories. And tell me, write me a letter. I'm available, jesseblaze@jessesnider.com. If you read these things and you go, you know what, I didn't like it. He was, he was a pussy, and whatever. Tell me, give me a valid reason, because I think you're gonna read all of this stuff and you're gonna go, wow, I wish we could get some of this Superman on to the big screen. The Death of Superman is really awesome, and it kicks off a continued story that you can get into on a whole bunch of levels, right? So After the death of Superman happens, they bring back 4 different replacement Supermans. They introduce a new Superboy, and there's a run by Carl Kessel that is enjoyable. I've only read some of this one, but my friend Joe Corallo, he recommended the Carl Kessel Superboy. He really enjoyed that. But the lead up in the trade paperbacks of Superman, of A World Without a Superman, and then the Return of the Superman, or A Return of Superman, and Return of the Supermen. I think maybe that one wasn't included in. I was looking at a list of. Well, I looked at a few different lists, but I was looking at one list of some of the Death of Superman stuff, and I'm thinking that they missed one of the things. So it would have been. There's a whole bunch of trade paperbacks. I got at the time years ago. I got like a collection of like 30 pages. If you go Death of Superman, you'll get recommended like the sequels, and the sequels continue. The World Without a Superman, there's Reign of the Supermen, maybe, and the Return of Superman, when Superman comes back. All of this stuff is by like Dan Jurgens and John Ordway, Louise Simonson, and like a lot more people. They're great. These are really great. It's a pretty cool place to start Superman. I ultimately started Superman with the JLA by Grant Morrison and Howard Porter. I think that was, I like worked backwards from there. Once I saw that I really liked Superman too, I was interested in maybe getting into Superman a little bit. I just went back to Death of Superman, and that was, I think that was maybe the recommendation of my buddy too. The one who had recommended the Superman, or was maybe my friend had recommended the Batman when he gets his back broken. I forget what that storyline's called. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll do when Superman dies. Maybe that's a good place to start. And it was a good place to start. And if it was actually Greg Aberbeck's fault that I read Superman from when he got killed, then credit to you, Greg. I don't remember anymore. All of these stories, it's so long ago since I've read some of these things. There's a ton of these that I would love to like reread with you, like Superman for All Seasons, yes, and Superman Peace on Earth. I just want to look at that book again. I used to have it's like a coffee table book. It's so beautiful. That one's a good one to get if you want to be like an adult super geek. Get Superman Peace on Earth by Alex Ross and Paul Dini and lay it on your coffee table. Anyway, it's relatively easy to find all that Death of Superman and Return of the Superman thing. Superboy comes out of that. There's new Steel that comes out of that. I love Steel. Steel's really cool. I don't know what's collected in the Steel things, but a lot of these things I'm going to recommend, they are railway stations to other places. So if you like some of the characters that are introduced here, you can follow Superboy into the Carl Kessel Superboy run. You can follow Steel's adventures. I don't know what's collected of Steel. I didn't look that up specifically, but with all of these, they'll be kind of veins that you can go down to follow various character stories. Moving on, I talked about Justice League or JLA by Morrison and Porter. Then I want to talk about Superman Shazam First Thunder by Judd Winnick and Josh Middleton. I love this. I think it was originally like a 3-issue miniseries. Super great. It's a really great introduction to Shazam, and there was a lot of different legal stuff with Superman and Shazam being too similar years and years ago when Shazam had come out in, I don't want to get years wrong, but it's like the freaking 60s or something. And basically DC eventually swallowed up what was then Captain Marvel, and he's become Shazam, and it was just sort of putting Shazam and Superman, framing them together in the DC universe to some degree, and pitting them against each other in some interesting ways. And I really enjoyed this one. Highly recommend it. Okay. And I like, some people don't like Judd Winnick, but I really like Judd Winnick as a writer in general. He wrote some X-Men stuff, Exiles, I think, and there's a whole bunch of different things that I remember following from him, even though I don't remember the titles. I just remember that I followed multiple things from him, and I always enjoyed his work. He has a very light-heartedness about him, humorous, charming sensibility. Anyway, Now we've got the Joe Kelly and Jeff Loeb Superman titles. Okay, so there was a time when Joe Kelly, who I've talked about before, he's one of my favorite writers of all time. He is the one who should be given the credit for why we love Deadpool so much. Even though the visual is great that Rob Liefeld has provided, even though it's a bit of a ripoff between Spider-Man and Snake Eyes. But not to undermine, his creator, but it was Joe. Joe came and he gave purpose to a lot of kind of silliness that was Deadpool from his name and like everything, and really turned him into the character that he is. So me as a fan of Joe Kelly, and there are other people like me who are fans of Joe Kelly because of like the real wonderful work he's done, I follow him everywhere. So I followed him over to X-Men. He actually I got into like other books because I was reading Deadpool and seeing the ads, and I was reading Marvel Knights and reading the X-Men books that he started reading. And then eventually I found out, oh, he's over at DC, he's writing Superman. And I came in like a few issues late, and I had to like play catch up on the first bunch of issues from this run because I wasn't paying as strict attention as I began to pay attention as I read more and more books. And then I would know everything was coming out. When it was coming out, I would be there and like, I was on it all the time so that things like this wouldn't happen. But Joe Kelly, Jeff Loeb, and two other guys, I'm not remembering their names off the top of my head, even though they did great work. Maybe it'll come to me while I'm talking about it, but I don't know if all of their stories are collected is the thing, because their stuff didn't come up. But Joe Kelly and Jeff Loeb's stuff is all collected, and I'm sure some of these guys have some work mixed in with it. But these four different people, they had 4 Superman titles running at once. And I was reading all 4 of these books. They were constantly tying into each other together, and they were great. All of them were great. The weakest one was still Superman. Like, just made me feel good, liked it, so I recommend this stuff. Some of my happiest reading of my life was reading Joe Kelly on Superman and Jeff Loeb on Superman. I think they both did great. One of my favorite issues by Jeff Loeb is I think drawn by Ed McGuinness, where they sort of have Krypto, the Superdog, unleashed. Krypto's in this run. I love Krypto. I love him. I love Superman having a dog that cares about him. It like makes me want to cry. This thing is full of it. Joe Kelly, he's got some doozies in here. One in particular that I often think of, about Wonder Woman and Superman getting stuck in this endless war, and they're fighting for years. They're in another dimension, and but for them it's nothing ever happens when they return. The story, this whole thing is really dope. It's one of the cool stories. I'm sure it's collected somewhere in here, along with one of the best Superman stories ever told, which I've talked about before, What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way, by Joe Kelly and Doug Menk. Dudes, this Superman stuff here, it's all wonderful. The trade paperbacks are something like No Limits is one of them. The one after that's supposed to be Endgame and Y2K, or Endgame, Y2K maybe is the 2 different names for it. Then there's one called Till Death Do Us Part, Critical Condition, Emperor Joker, which was one of my freaking favorites. I love that storyline. The Emperor Joker storyline is super great. By Joe Kelly and Jeff Loeb and team. I'm sure there'll be those other guys' names will show up there. I feel so bad that I can't remember their names, but I feel disingenuous to stop now and go look it up. Also, President Lex is another story arc right after that. These are all in different trade paperbacks. That was great as well. Our Worlds at War 1 and 2 was pretty good. If you want to continue, if you're enjoying these trade paperbacks, and Return to Krypton and Ending Battle and Godfall are all part of this thing. I remembered them all fondly. Some of the best stuff is earlier in the run, but it's all really good and solid work. Jeff Loeb then moves over with Ed McGuinness, who he was doing some work on Superman. Like I said, I think he at least did the cover to that Krypto the Superdog issue that I love. Him and Ed McGuinness go over to do Batman Superman. They do a pretty long run on it, at least like multiple like arcs, but it's divided by work from other really big artists at the time. And the arcs are included and for Batman Superman by Jeff Loeb and Ed McGuinness. It starts with Public Enemies. Then there's a Supergirl arc. Oh, sorry. There's been like planes doing military runs. They keep scaring the crap out of me all day. They were like, one of them got like really close, and I literally for a second it was getting so intense that I was like, okay, God, if this is a missile, I thought I was gonna get blown up. Thank you, military, for flying so close to my apartment. Not cool, yo, not cool. So Batman, Superman, Public Enemies is where you start. Then Supergirl, Absolute Power, and Vengeance were the ones that I had figured out. And forgive me if I'm missing any of these. When you use Amazon and some of these websites, they will give you plenty of recommendations to connecting titles. And when you get these physical books, they will give you plenty of recommendations to other things that have been printed in their catalog that you can then go find. So, hopefully this is just going to take you years of your life to get through this list. I've only just begun to help you with Superman. Joe Kelly and Jeff Loeb's Superman is a great place to start all by itself. Like, bang, just jump in there with no limits. It's great. Superman, Unconventional Warfare, Healing Touch, Sacrifice, and iMac Project. I think that's right. Countdown to Infinite Crisis. Rucka, Jeff Johns, Greg Rucka, Jeff Johns, Matthew Clark, Paul Peltieri. Okay, so there's a lot of people who worked on some of these things right here, but this is an era of Superman. New writers came onto the book. One of the guys is Greg Rucka. I love him. Jeff Johns begins to work on Superman a bit. Jeff Johns is wonderful. He does a great Toyman story that's somewhere, I think, in the mix here. All these stories are pretty solid. Superman, Unconventional Warfare, certainly a great thing to continue if you want to continue your reading after jumping in with Kelly and Loeb Superman. This is good. This stuff isn't quite as good as where I'm telling you to jump in Kelly and Loeb, or people recommend Byrne big time. The Death of Superman, I think, is a great place to start. But the Greg Rucka, Jeff Johns, like beginning of that stuff here, that stuff's wonderful as well. I don't think it's necessarily the best place to start, but it's some great Superman. Okay, so that was Superman, Unconventional Warfare, Healing Touch, Sacrifice, and I think it's the iMac Project, Countdown to Infinite Crisis. And then Infinite Crisis and Superman Infinite Crisis by Joe Kelly, very good. All of that stuff's really great. That's like some universe-spanning stuff. Justice League, you'll see other characters that you'll get introduced. That's the wonderful thing, too, about reading these books when the crossovers are done well, because it is such a one-stop shop to get you introduced to some of the characters and why they're cool and interesting, when they are done correctly. And Infinite Crisis is a cool spot to start. You'll notice if you don't read the things, the Crisis and Infinite, this is a thing that DC has been doing for a long time now. This is their brand, so when there's anything goes crazy, it's a crisis of some kind. Usually it means they're putting some of their top talent into it, and I will recommend another Crisis by the end of this podcast. Okay. Then you got Superman Up, Up, and Away, Back in Action, and Camelot Falls, and Redemption. Also the third Kryptonian, 321 Action. All of this is by a mixture of Jeff Johns and Kurt Busiek, Pete Woods, various other talent. This is good stuff. Again, I remember the Jeff Loeb and Joe Kelly stuff much more clearly, but I do remember enjoying the hell out of all of this as well. So I would recommend it to anybody. And if you recognize some of these names, maybe you've read something by Jeff Johns. He's great. If you like him, well, go put his name in and pull up some of his Superman and start with some of his Superman if you know you like that guy. Kurt Busiek's really a great journeyman writer as well. He could be a little old school for some people. He's a little old school for me sometimes, but I still enjoy a lot of his work. Now we got Last Son of Krypton by Jeff Johns, Richard Donner, Adam Kubert, and Gary Frank. This stuff is beautiful. I think it was a little bit of a letdown for me at the time because, you know, it was such a big deal. It was like, oh man, we got Richard Donner, the guy who made the Superman movies, working with Jeff Johns. But, you know, I think it was a little bit of like a PR stunt more than anything else. But it's a beautiful book. It's fun. Jeff Johns has a whole bunch of kind of fun books here that continue through that I'm going to recommend. You know, the next one is Escape from Bizarro World with Eric Powell. That one's fun. Superman and the Legion of Superheroes. That one's really exciting. The only thing about it all was like the Superman, the Legion of Superheroes thing is it really is great. And it feels like it's really going to go somewhere. And it just never really went anywhere. And if you continue to follow it, you'll sort of follow it, and it'll be like, yeah. That's it. Okay. but some of that story starts here. Some of that story's great. But it's really like the promise of it was really great. It just never really quite arrives at the greatness. I think they maybe change their plans somewhere along the way and like screw it up. But it is really wonderful. The introduction of the Legion, or reintroduction of the Legion by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank here. And there are some more books that you can read beyond that if you like it. Also, you got Brainiac by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank. Gary Frank and Jeff Johns, like they were like the main team on Superman, and then there were different artists who would fill in occasionally to give Gary a break. The Brainiac story arc is great. Then you've got Superman New Krypton Volume 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Last Stand on New Krypton 1 and 2, and War of the Supermen. This storyline, if I remember correctly, was basically just a whole bunch of Kryptonians show up out of nowhere, and they're all living on the planet and in their own little space or whatever, and it's a big fight. Not my favorite kind of Superman story because it's just Superman on Superman. You know, he's fighting a ton of different people with his own powers. I prefer Superman beating up monsters and aliens and stuff like that. But it is ultimately really some great work. Jeff Johns is a wonderful, wonderful comic book writer, and he does some great work here. So find that stuff. Enjoy that stuff. Also, if you're into Supergirl, Supergirl, I read some of Peter David's run. He didn't exactly get to finish his run. It was a little weird what happened there. You have to find out the history of that in comics another time. But Sterling Gates had a pretty decent run on the new Supergirl for a little while. I believe some of that is collected. Look up Supergirl and Sterling Gates. You'll also, of course, get a great introduction to Supergirl in the Superman Batman comic book by Jeff Loeb. Then we've got Teen Titans by Jeff Johns. The Jeff Johns run of Teen Titans introduces a Connor Kent who is a clone of Superman and Lex Luthor's genetics mixed together. And that run is just a great run in general. It'll introduce you to Robin and some of the other mythologies of the DC universe by virtue of the book. The book is wonderful and worth reading in general as well. But because it has some great Superboy in it, it is worth checking out for you Superman people. Anyway, Peter J. Tomasi eventually got onto Superman along with Dan Jurgens for Superman's Rebirth, and the two of them had a run that is really beloved. I still have not gotten around to reading this, but I'm really excited to read it. I was told it was great. Both of these creators are really great journeyman editor, writers, creators, and they know what they're doing. So I trust in them. Peter J. Tomasi's graphic novel run includes titles such as Son of Superman, Trials of the Super Son. He introduces Superman's son here, the young Jonathan Kent. Multiplicity, Black Dawn, Hopes and Fears, Imperious Lex, and Bizarroverse. And Dan Jurgens' run has Path of Doom, Welcome to the Planet, Men of Steel, The New World, The Oz Effect, and Booster Shot. And then there's also a story arc in here, I think that kind of fits in a little bit earlier to things, called Superman Reborn, that is written by both Jurgens and Tomasi. All of these things have come highly recommended. As well as one that I really wanted to read, but I never got around to reading it. Philip Kennedy Johnson, he did a Superman War World story relatively recently that was... well, it just looks so cool. I thought it looked so cool. I can't wait to read that one. I was hoping it was going to be good, and my friend said it was awesome. Also coming out of all of this stuff at the time from Rebirth was the Super Sons. There's a whole bunch of trade paperbacks that were released. I have one of them that I'm reading right now, which is, I guess, not included in these normal volumes, but it's called Super Sons of Tomorrow. I'm enjoying the hell out of that. There's 3 other trade paperbacks beyond that. One called When I Grow Up, another one called Planet of the Capes, and then the third one's called Parent Trap. Anyway, that comes highly recommended as well. Doomsday Clock is pretty awesome. It's another one of those world-shaking events at DC. When there's a world-shaking event, Batman, Superman, they're usually all up in it, and Superman... Doomsday Clock, this one's no different. I highly recommend this. Now we got Lex Luthor, Man of Steel. Oh, and Doomsday Clock, by the way, it's by Jeff Johns, and I believe it's another Gary Frank one, right? I'm pretty sure. I don't remember. Lex Luthor and Man of Steel, Azzarello and Lee Bermagero. He's this guy whose name I couldn't pronounce last time. Lee Bermagero. Something like that. Lee Bermagero. His artwork's amazing. Lee Bermagero. Brian Azzarello is a really great writer. Lex Luthor, Man of Steel. It's really cool. It's a little like character deconstruction thing, kind of adult. Yeah, it's cool. You'll dig it. I'm starting to get into things that are like out of continuity, a little bit more abstract. I was going to maybe make one of the first things I recommended, All-Star Superman, but my friend Joe, he feels like you really need like a little bit of wind under your wings, understanding Superman to appreciate All-Star Superman. So I don't know, maybe save All-Star Superman for a little while. I thought All-Star Superman was pretty evergreen myself and a good place for people to start. So, if you ever see it and you go, oh, I want to grab it, maybe take a risk. Some amazing artwork in there written by Grant Morrison, whose work on the character mostly falls into big events and Justice League, issues of Justice League and things like that he's written. He has also done Final Crisis, including this amazing 3D Superman issue, this Superman Beyond 3D. There's 2 issues of it. Oh my God. Pretty amazing. Final Crisis is pretty dope. It's really like ambitious, and to fully appreciate it, I think you really got to read all of Grant Morrison's story, like every piece of it. And there's a lot of different graphic novel pieces, but the ones written by him are the most important ones. He's amazing, and Grant Morrison is one of my favorite authors in comic books. And if I do anything other than get you into Grant Morrison and make you a Grant Morrison fan for life, then I've done enough, because he's a great writer. He's entertained me for many hours, and thank you, Grant, wherever you are out there in the world. I appreciate all the entertainment you have brought to my life. It is some good stuff, dude. And everybody on this list, really, like I've read most of this stuff, and there's just lovely entertainment to be had. Okay, continuing on our little extras list here, we've got Secret Origins by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank. If you like all the stuff that you see by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank, grab that one as well, Secret Origins. It's a good one. It just kind of retells Superman's origin. DC's done a number of different retellings of Superman's origin, so if you're paying too close attention, you might be like, hey, wait a second. But that's just the way the cookie has crumbled. But it generally is like close enough. Kryptonite by Darwin Cook and Tim Sale. I talked to you about Tim Sale. I love him so much. He usually works with Jeff Johns. He very rarely does anything without Jeff Johns, but in this rare case, he worked with Darwin Cook. Kryptonite, it's wonderful. Great story. Go check that one out. That's a wonderful. I mean, I feel like that one might be evergreen as well. Some of them are evergreen, but also at the same time, it's good to get into some of the runs that have happened and really feel like the adventures of Superman feel like, because it's the runs that so many of these miniseries and short stories are always homaging. So if you don't like read a run and get that experience of like, oh, and then this, a month later this came out, a month later this came out, a month later this come out, I think you're doing yourself a little bit of a disservice in what's the concepts that are constantly being played on by anybody telling any of these short form stories, because you're usually coming in and snippeting. But really, if you can get in and do a few different volumes of the John Byrne run or a few different volumes of the Jeff Loeb and Joe Kelly, that's what you want. That's a good way to really get into comics, I say. Continuing on, we've got Kingdom Come by Ross and Wade. Mark Wade, one of the greatest writers in comics. Shout out to Mark Wade. He rules. Alex Ross, one of the greatest artists in comics. These are fully painted, incredible. Kingdom Come is super cool. It's like the future where the superheroes have inherited the earth and they've gotten a bit out of hand, and the old guard has to come out of retirement to beat down the young guard. It's very cool. It really just looks gorgeous. Everything about it is super dope. But all of the things that you're going to see in Kingdom Come are twists on the normal conventions. And you're not going to appreciate all of the twists on the normal conventions, the normal way that all these characters are depicted, unless you get into those things. So, as with the case with Superman, it's worth reading, getting into some of the early stuff before you get into some of the later stuff. I think it's probably would have been richer for me to see John Byrne's Superman and then read Death of Superman. I didn't do that, and then because I didn't do it that way, I never went back further. But this is the thing. You make your reading for yourself more exciting if you can build up your knowledge of various characters and various history, because those characters and the history is on full display when wonderful creative people like Mark Waid and Alex Ross do a project like Kingdom Come. And if you're really if you've been paying attention, if you've been reading the right things, you're just going to be like, oh, whoa, yes. So, you can make an experience reading Kingdom Come really, really rich for yourself if you do the homework beforehand with a lot of other stuff. Continuing there's a little bit of a sequel by Jeff Johns with covers by Alex Ross, and I don't know if it was Dale Eagleson and some other people. I think there's at least a few parts to this story, but it's called Justice Society, Thy Kingdom Come. It's awesome, and if you like Kingdom Come and you want to do a little bit more there's just like one story arc that you can get in there. But I actually highly recommend JSA by David Goyer, who's responsible for the Batman Dark Knight trilogy that Christopher Nolan did. He's the writer of that. He also wrote the Blade movies. David Goyer's awesome. Also involved writing-wise is Jeff Johns and James Robinson. Tons of amazing artists. JSA, it's a great one, and I don't really feel like you need to necessarily know a lot to just get in and start reading all the JSA trades. I mean, it's so awesome, and they eventually lead to this story arc here where the Superman from Kingdom Come, which is why I'm recommending Kingdom Come, because Superman is the leader of all the superheroes within Kingdom Come. I should have probably pointed that out. He comes to the Justice Society, and he actually stays on the team for a little bit after that, if I remember correctly. So a fun way to get into Justice Society there, which is a great book. Continuing, Superman Speeding Bullets. This is a Elseworld where Superman is Batman. He wears a Batman costume, but he's got Superman's powers. I never read it myself, but I was always really interested in it, and I was told it was pretty cool. So Superman Speeding Bullets, check that one out. Then you got Superman versus Aliens. I don't know if there's more than one of these. There probably is, but there was at least one of them that I thought was really cool. So if something like that appeals to you, that's a good way to get into Superman. There's also an Elseworlds called Superman Red Sun by Brian Azzarello, and I believe Dave Johnson, who's one of my favorite artists. At the very least, he did the covers. This book tells the story of a Superman who lands in Russia and basically is raised differently. Superman Red Sun is a favorite amongst a lot of people. It was never a huge hit with me, but I loved how it looked, and I liked it pretty good. A bigger hit for me was the Elseworld called Justice League: The Nail by Alan Davis. Alan Davis is a wonderful, wonderful creative guy. He's done tons of classic books, Excalibur and other ones. But Alan's The Nail series, the first one in particular, is just really great because it's all about Superman not being there. What if Superman had wound up somewhere else and we didn't have a Superman? Like how much darker would the world be if it didn't have a Superman? He really tells it in just a wonderful way that juxtaposed against, I don't know if I'm saying that right, actually, juxtaposed against, but sort of framed against this poem about this knight that gets lost because his horse throws a shoe, and the horse throws a shoe because a nail, and all because this nail and this horseshoe and this horse throwing the shoe, and they lose this one knight. They lose the whole battle because they lost one knight because of one horseshoe, because of one nail. And so like it was this whole thing about this really small thing made the difference in the battle, and Superman not being around made the difference in the battle. And I just was so moved by Justice League: The Nail, and it really said something about Superman, about something that Alan Davis as a creator had noticed about Superman in his reading of the character, and I appreciate that he noticed it, and I love that storyline. And I think the Elseworlds, when you can learn something new about the character that you couldn't normally learn from the normal way that they did it, but it enriches the character like this. You learn things about the character in this It's a Wonderful Life kind of way of like, what would the world be like without George Bailey? It wouldn't be as bright. It wouldn't be as great. He's a great guy. Okay, moving on. We got Superman's Secret Identity by Kurt Busiek and Stuart Iomen. I remember liking this book pretty good. I'm not a huge Kurt Busiek fan. I'm not a huge Stuart Iomen fan, but I do like both their work, and I do end up reading most of their work. I'm just not like clamoring for it all the time. I don't remember exactly everything that happened here, but I remember enjoying this and thinking that it was really good. There were other Busiek things on this list that I recommended. If you like those Busiek things, come back around to Superman's Secret Identity and read that. I think it was another bit of like a retelling of his origin, of like his beginnings in Smallville and stuff like that. It was pretty good. Okay. I went over Final Crisis. I went over... there's a book called Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman by Matt Wagner and Dave Stewart. It's really pretty. It's really classic and cool. I enjoyed that one very much when it came out at the time. I think you probably enjoy it as well. It's collected into a single edition. It originally came out in like 3 issues, like the Trinity. Was a cool one. Okay, last two. The one that opened it up was an Alan Moore one, and we're going to close it up with this Alan Moore one, and then one more we'll talk about. Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow by Alan Moore and Kurt Swan. The story, the last Superman story this book is meant to be. It was, at the time that I read it, was a little bit over my head I didn't know anything about Superman and the history of Superman and the things that were going on in it. I didn't really get or gather. But if you dig through this list of Superman, it should be the last one that you read once you feel like you're a Superman fan and you've read some damn Superman. It's a good Superman story. It is, after all, the last Superman story. And the only last Superman story I can say after the last Superman story is actually the first Superman story, Action Comics #1. I still haven't read this myself, but my friend Joe, he gave me a impassioned plea for some of the classic Superman stuff. If you're somebody who's an aficionado, I don't really like to expound the classics because I feel like they make the newer ones, like for somebody who's not experienced in comics, if they come in and you recommend a bunch of old school books to them, it tends to make the hobby look passé, like we're not really up with the times. The stories have progressed so much. There are certain things that hold up. There are certain things that don't really hold up. A lot of the stories from the 60s and stuff, I can't even begin to read them. I'll hurt myself before I read them. I don't mean to be dramatic. They're just so boring for me. But there is some real historical significance behind Action Comics #1. This is the introduction of the world's first superhero, essentially. You know, the linchpin of the DC universe. Everything that will come after comic books comes from this book. The idea that this could be a profitable endeavor to companies making characters with capes. You know, there's a lot of historical significance to Action Comics #1. It would be worth it for you and I, because I still haven't done it myself, and I do consider myself a historian who would do something like that. But there are certain things I just don't like to read because I find them very boring because I have ADHD and okay, I'll do it. I'll do it. Son of a gun. I struggled through Crisis on Infinite Earths just for the street cred. I'll struggle through this as well. Or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. It is actually true. Like I have an Action Comics backpack that has pages of Action Comics #1 printed on it. So I have read some of Action Comics #1, but it's a small backpack. So, it's not the whole book. Anyway, I think I've given you a pretty good breadth of the Superman mythology. I mean, there's more stories. There's other things that I could recommend. There's other, what do you call it? Not Vertigo stories, Elseworld stories of Superman. There is so much more that I would recommend. I know if I had my long boxes of all the books that I used to read back in the day, I used to get rid of the things that I never planned to read again, and then I would get rid and hold on to the things I planned to read again. But then I kept moving all the time, and moving the thousands and thousands of comic books that I had became untenable. So I decided I was just going to get rid of everything, and if I ever wanted to read it again, I would buy a graphic novel, and it would be easy. And, it's really annoying, though, when I want to recommend comic books to people, because I used to have long boxes full, and then I would be like, ooh, and then I could tell you all the things. So now I have to rely on websites and stuff and other people to remind me and show me pictures. Like, show me a picture. What does it look like? Oh, yeah, I read that. Love that. Ooh, good one. It's like, how else do you figure it out? Anyway, yeah. I'm so excited to hear from you about this. Like, I did the 101, which is a basic introduction to comics now. I did 2 episodes on Batman, and I did this episode on Superman. I probably won't do any more like this until I start hearing from you as an audience that you're taking my cues and you're listening, whether I get numbers back from the episodes and they do really well or whatever it might be. But, you got to let me know. Write me at jesseblaze@jessesnider.com. If you read any of these things, let me know what you thought. Let me know what your impression was. Did I mislead you? Did I lead you to the promised land? Do you feel happier? Is your life better because you listened to the Coolest Geek Alive? I hope it is. I hope you're having a wonderful morning today, and I hope you have a great Saturday, and I hope that you join me again on Wednesday when I'm talking about, I don't know yet, but we'll see what happens when I get there. And join me next Saturday again for another episode like this, where I just talk about something maybe a little bit deeper in, or make a list, or do something just kind of fun, like recommending the best shit to indulge. You want to read the best shit about Superman? This is the best shit about Superman. I believe in you, my friends. I believe that you could do this. I love you so much, and thank you so much for joining me for another fabulous episode of the Coolest Geek Alive. Peace!
It's my favorite part! Isn't that heavy? I gonna be fucking awesome. Coolest alive. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Stay with your tribe. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Revenge of the Geeks. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Week after weeks. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Laughing with you. It's gonna be fucking awesome. And crying sometimes too. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Spelling it out. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Making you shout.
You've been listening to Coolest Geek Alive with me, your host, Jesse Blaze Snider. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe for more excellent geek culture content. Thanks for listening.
You like that? It's a kazoo solo. I played that too. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Talking some shit. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Living your shit. My voice is fucking awesome. Food in our mouth. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Get in the mouth. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Tell all your friends. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Call right or text. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Raising the bar. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Straight to the stars. It's gonna be fucking awesome. It's starting soon. Straight to the top. Passing the moon. It's gonna be fucking awesome. On with the show. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Ready, set, go. It's going to be fucking awesome. Fucking awesome. It's gonna be fucking awesome. Just wait. You'll see. You'll all see.
The podcast playground. Hooray!